Will all the Fidel Castro apologists finally get the memo now? Will everyone who has ever supported this murderous regime, do you finally see what they were all along from day one? And I don't want to be snarky or sarcastic, much less smug, because I really would love to put my little grain of sand in the ripple effects of life to just bring as much awareness not only to what's happening in Cuba, but to the fact that communism as an ideology will never work the way it's promised to work. Maybe on a small scale, when it's a very small group of people, maybe 150 or so, it could work when everybody's on the same page and everyone agrees to communally share property, and they agree to leave with nothing if they choose to leave that little experiment. I believe the Mennonites, not the Amish, I think it was the other sect of the Amish. Um, they were, as a matter of fact, they were in Venezuela. There was a group of, I believe they were Mennonites in Venezuela, and they were practicing what is true communism. And they got their lands, their farms expropriated or nationalized by Hugo Chavez, who was claiming to instill socialism there. That's what the communists always do. At least the ones who are power hungry enough to become leaders. And if Fidel Castro's own sister, I'm going to be reading this from Wikipedia, Juanita Castro, and I don't mean to make fun of her, what she must have gone through with her own brother and her own brothers. I mean, seeing this, the way it tore her family apart. And I was just reading here where in 1964 she left Cuba for Mexico, staying with her sister Emma. Upon her arrival, she called a press conference and announced that she had defected from Cuba. Quote, "I cannot longer remain indifferent to what is happening in my country," she said. "My brothers, Fidel and Raul, have made it an enormous prison surrounded by water. The people are nailed to a cross of torment imposed by international communism." This was back in 1964. And enough people didn't get the message. Look, people like my mother didn't. I keep bringing my mother, I keep dragging her out of the grave for these videos. And she ended up in a forced labor camp, thinking that that might work, giving it a chance. Her sister, my aunt, she left in 1961, I believe. She saw it was a dictatorship from the get-go. By the way, Fidel's sister Juanita, she apparently was active in helping them with their revolution, buying weapons for the 26th of July movement during their campaign against Fulgencio Batista. So in 1958, she traveled to the U.S. to raise funds to support the insurgent movement. And yet, this is what, if there's one thing I wish I could communicate to the world, is we need to do a better job of identifying these narcissistic, megalomaniacal, murderous psychopaths who are hell-bent on power. That's all they want. That's all they care about. They'll sacrifice their own families. They're more than happy to probably kill their own children if they had to in order to stay in absolute power. By the way, it's not for nothing why Fidel Castro's first son committed suicide 2 years after his father's death. They claim it was depression. And by the way, I would totally believe that it was depression. But there's also rumors that it's a suicide. And every time I've tried to read up on, I'm not making fun of these people. Anybody who was born into that family, they dealt with it the way they had to. Fidelito is what they used to call him. Every time I've tried to read up on Fidelito's death, not even on Wikipedia, not on any of the articles, none of them say how he killed himself. From what I understand, this is hearsay, please correct me in the comments down below, he supposedly jumped off a building. Anyway, consider that right now, I believe it's 5 generals, I think up to 6 now. I think today in the news, July 29th, it's up to 6 generals in the Castro regime that have just died. 5 for sure that died. And I don't have their names up right now, but chances are it wasn't from COVID. Okay, they just died very suddenly because there's obviously now a scramble, a desperate scramble to stay in power. Because that's the problem. That one thing also I would love to communicate, especially to people who have been making excuses for the Castro regime and have thought that they could actually educate me on what my family went through. That's the beauty of so many of these Castro apologists. They're never Cuban, or well, there's quite a few of those that are Cuban. There's no doubt about that. But the ones that I'm thinking about, they're not Cuban. They've traveled to Cuba. I'm sure they've sipped mojitos in Old Havana. I'm sure they've done that. They've gone salsa dancing when they've gone there. And so they think that they could actually lecture people who've actually gone through that as if though they know it better than we do. And I remember I can get into so many stories, but I don't want to make this video too long. I really hope most of those people are finally getting the message. There's quite a few of them that I almost feel like reaching out to them and being like, so what do you think about the Castro regime now? And coming back to the generals that have killed themselves, or I don't know if they've killed themselves, who've been offed. Basically, the 5 to 6 generals that are dead since July 11th, I believe. Whether it's from COVID or old age, whatever it is, the way the Castro regime took power, they ended up getting everybody complicit in it. Everyone's got some blood on their hands one way or another. Most people live in confiscated homes. That entire government has been illegitimate since 1959. And I wish more people understood that. That's why they have to stay in power. Them and every other dictator. They cannot let go of power. And it's not simply because, they're just such narcissistic megalomaniacs. Sure, which I'm sure they are. I'm sure there's a lot of that there. But they know they can't, because then they would have to face justice. And they cannot do that. And enough people have been supporting them because there's enough people whose self-interests are tied to the Castros remaining in power. In Venezuela, for example, the regime, the Maduro regime over there in Venezuela is somewhat dependent on Cuba, at the very least, with how to do it. They're dependent on how do we do it? How do we stay in power? And that's how they have managed to stay in power, by making sure that everyone is somewhat complicit. And there's just no escaping. If you're not in that island with the Castro regime in power, then you are going to be facing justice of some sort. And you most certainly just can't easily move abroad and have all your assets not confiscated, especially assets that were probably never yours to begin with. And it's such a shame. It's such a shame that not enough people understand this, especially young people. And I get it. Politics is it's something nobody wants to deal with. I think politics is kind of like eating healthy. It's almost like, it's something you don't want to do, or working out to a large degree. Not everybody likes to go jogging once a week. I don't, but I do it every Monday, 5 miles. I go jogging because I know it's really good for my heart. It's really good for my lungs, and it somewhat stabilizes my weight. It keeps me from going overweight. And so, just like there are certain things you really don't like to do, politics is one of those that I get it. It's a nasty, ugly subject for the most part. It brings out a lot of ugliness in people, but the more you understand it, the better off you are. And it takes a while. It's very counterintuitive, as it is. Reality itself is counterintuitive. And what I mean by that is, if you didn't know that the earth is round, you would swear it was flat. And you would also probably think it was still. The idea that we are living on a gigantic rock covered in water that spins at about 1,000 miles per hour as it orbits the sun at another neck-breaking speed of about 26,000 miles per hour. I think that's how fast the Earth is orbiting around the sun. It's very hard to fathom that. And the same thing definitely goes with politics and economics. These are very complicated subjects. And I think that's why you get that saying of, if you're not a liberal in your 20s, you have no heart. But if you're not a conservative after your 20s or after your 30s, however the saying goes, you have no brains. And I would say if you're not a liberal and a conservative after your 40s, or if you haven't figured out that there's a time and place to be liberal and a time and place to be conservative after your 40s, you're not thinking things hard enough. You're not thinking things through hard enough. And I really wish more people just took the time to understand this, so we wouldn't keep repeating the same mistakes over and over in society, and having these monsters ruling over us. Because even though I'm not living in Cuba, sorry to have to say it that way, my family's Cuban. My parents were definitely Cuban, both of them. I am so glad I was not born there. Damn, am I so glad I wasn't born there. And especially with that, having to go to school with that stupid little red scarf saying, Yo seré como el Che. Ugh. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. And what's really disgusting, also another point I want to make here, is how many people don't realize that that was just a bullshit ideology. Like, I'm positive that Fidel Castro himself didn't believe any of that crap. It was just a convenient tool. Just like there's rumors, or not even rumors, I'm sure that there are enough televangelists, religious televangelists out there who are atheists. The same thing with Muslim clerics, that they're just atheists, but they know that the religion, as bullshit as it is, it keeps them in power. It keeps people in line. It's very convenient. I wish more people understood this. That is the reality. That's the reality. Like, it's not simply my opinion, because a lot of people will be like, well, it's your opinion. No. Actions speak louder than words. What Fidel Castro did to his own family, I mean, the fact that his sister fled Cuba in 1964, called out both of those two brothers, because they had another brother, Ramon Castro, who also, if I'm not mistaken, he had problems with Raul. Whatever. Look, I'm not going to get into their family drama. And it's a family I wish I didn't have to. I wish I didn't have to know anything about these despicable monsters. But they unfortunately end up shape-shifting civilization. And it's due to a lot of understandable ignorance by a lot of young people, or people who have no idea. But it's also thanks to a lot of people who are intentionally ignorant about it. The Castro apologists. And again, I don't want to insult, but it's the useful idiots. And I could go down a whole list of so many supposed intellectuals. Though right now, the only one I'm just going to use on the thumbnail is Oliver Stone. And maybe I'll mention Sean Penn, Michael Moore. And they don't even fall under the category of intellectuals, especially not Sean Penn. Michael Moore is seen as somewhat of a journalist. And I can go on and on about how wrong he was on the Cuban healthcare system, especially with the asthma inhalers, and how they get hoarded over in Cuba. It's not just the embargo, it's the psychopaths in that regime that are hoarding all the supplies. As much as I want to end this video on saying, I hope you idiots finally get it. Of course, I don't want to insult people. I don't. And if anybody got as far as listening to this video now, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. Check out the links down below. And thanks for watching.